Ryan's Office Revenge.
The meeting room went dead silent when Gavin Sterling slammed that folder down on the conference table. His voice had that fake concern managers practice in front of mirrors. "You're under internal investigation," he announced, eyes sweeping across my colleagues before landing on me with barely hidden satisfaction. "My name is Zachary Pierce, 56 years old. Until that moment, everyone thought I was Mason Wells, senior financial analyst at Alpine Financial. But I wasn't. I was an FBI agent who'd spent 11 months building this fake identity, and now my cover was about to blow sky high. "For what exactly?" I asked, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline hitting my system like a freight train. "Unauthorized system access, data transfers during unusual hours, excessive interest in accounts outside your department." Sterling ticked off each accusation like he was reading grocery prices. "Pretty serious stuff, Mason." The whole team shifted away from me like I had some contagious disease. Rachel Foster, who'd borrowed my stapler that morning with a smile, suddenly found her notepad fascinating. Shane Bennett, who'd invited me to his daughter's birthday party last weekend, studied his watch like time might stop if he looked away. "We've been monitoring your activities for weeks," Sterling continued, clearly enjoying himself. "The evidence is substantial." My palms stayed dry, not from fear, from calculation. This was happening 3 weeks ahead of schedule, but I'd been in worse spots during my time in the Gulf War. Patricia would have been proud of how calm I stayed. God, I missed that woman. "I'd like to see this evidence," I said. "That's not how this works." He slid a document across the table. "Simple admission of improper conduct makes this discreet. You'll be escorted out today with 2 weeks severance." The alternative hung in the air like smoke from a bad fire. "And if I refuse?" I asked. His smile got tighter. "Then things get much less pleasant." The team watched this, like spectators at a car wreck. These people who'd praised my work yesterday now waited to see how thoroughly I'd get destroyed. I reached for my phone. "This isn't a negotiation," Sterling snapped. "You don't get to call anyone." I ignored him, dialing with the same calm I'd used when Saddam's forces were shooting at us 30 years ago. Military training kicks in when you need it most. Stay focused. Execute the mission. "Hello, is this the FBI?" I kept eye contact with Sterling. "Yes, this is Agent Pierce. The bridge is compromised. I repeat, the bridge is compromised." Sterling lunged across the table, reaching for my phone. "What the hell do you think?" "Code yellow at location Sunflower," I continued, dodging his grab with reflexes I'd kept sharp since Desert Storm. "Request immediate backup." Chaos erupted. Sterling knocked over his chair trying to get to me. 2 senior managers bolted for the door. The rest of the team froze like deer in headlights. "He's bluffing," Sterling shouted, his face turning red. "Security!" I stood my ground, using the same calm I'd maintained when Iraqi artillery was falling around our position. "Am I?" The security guard appeared at the doorway, looking confused. For one heart-stopping moment, he moved toward me instead of Sterling. Had my message failed? Was my team not in position? Then came the thunder of footsteps in the hallway. "Federal agents, everyone stay where you are!" Sterling's face went from rage to disbelief as a dozen agents flooded the room. My actual colleagues, not the strangers I'd pretended to work alongside for nearly a year. "This is ridiculous." Sterling backed away. "We were following standard procedure for employee misconduct." "Save it," said Agent Bryce Coleman, handcuffs already out. "We've heard enough over the wire he's been wearing." My colleagues stared at me, understanding finally dawning. I wasn't Mason Wells from financial analysis after all. As Sterling got read his rights, our eyes locked, his held. Something I'd waited 11 months to see, the realization that he wasn't untouchable. The beginning of justice for 1,200 people who had no idea what was happening to their money. But this wasn't the end. Hell, it was barely the beginning. Let me tell you how this all started. 4 years ago, my wife Patricia died from a heart attack at 49. The stress killed her. Stress from watching our retirement savings disappear through a construction loan scam almost identical to what Alpine was running. Small fees, mysterious charges, money that vanished bit by bit until we couldn't afford her heart medication. I'd been a construction project manager for 25 years before that. Good at spotting when contractors were cutting corners or padding bills. Started right out of the service at 31, worked my way up through union jobs and government contracts. But when it happened to us, I was just another victim. The shame of not seeing it coming, of failing to protect my own wife, ate at me every single day. After Patricia's funeral, I sold everything and joined the FBI. At 51, most people thought I was crazy. Career change that late in life. But I had a mission now. My military background from the Gulf War helped. They liked the discipline, the ability to follow orders, the tactical thinking. More importantly, they needed someone who understood both construction financing and field operations. The FBI was expanding their white-collar crime division, looking for agents with real-world business experience. My 25 years managing million-dollar construction projects, dealing with contractors, understanding complex financing arrangements, that was exactly what they needed for financial fraud cases. When the pattern of complaints about Alpine Financial reached our office 18 months ago, I recognized it immediately. Hundreds of ordinary people reporting mysterious fees and vanishing funds. Small amounts, just enough to fly under the radar, the same pattern that had killed my Patricia. Nobody would steal just $50, my supervisor had said when I first brought the pattern to his attention. They would if they took $50 from thousands of people, I'd countered. Do the math. $6 to $8 fees per month per person. That's $86,400 to $115,200 per year from just basic fees, and that's only one fee type. The numbers told the story, but we needed proof. 3 weeks of preliminary investigation revealed something bigger than we'd imagined, a sophisticated scheme targeting specific customer demographics, mainly older clients, immigrants with language barriers, and young adults with their first accounts. People less likely to question authority or understand the fine print. The team was skeptical about sending someone undercover. White-collar investigations typically involved warrants, not wires. But traditional approaches had failed with Alpine. They were too careful with their paper trail, too smart about covering their tracks. We need someone on the inside, I argued during the strategy meeting. Someone who can track the money as it moves, see how they operate day to day. It's risky, Agent Coleman said. If they catch you, we lose everything. They won't catch me. I had the confidence that comes from surviving combat and managing construction crews for 25 years. I know project financing, I understand their world, and I can blend in. That someone became me, Mason Wells, recent transplant from Phoenix with decent credentials and an unassuming manner, perfect for a senior analyst position at Alpine Financial's main branch. We spent 2 weeks building the identity, creating employment history, social media presence, even got me a Phoenix driver's license. The construction background helped. I could talk credibly about project financing, cost overruns, and vendor management, skills that translated perfectly to financial analysis work. Getting hired was surprisingly easy. They were expanding rapidly, needed experienced analysts, and my resume was solid. The interview went smoothly. I talked about wanting a fresh start after my wife's death from cancer. That part wasn't entirely fake. What followed was months of methodical work, building trust while hunting for evidence. I'd arrive early, make coffee for the team, volunteer for extra assignments. Classic military reconnaissance. Blend in, observe, document everything. I learned about Rachel Foster's struggles with fertility treatments and her husband's job at the power company. Shane Bennett was proud of his daughter's science fair projects and worried about his mother's diabetes. Nicole Walsh complained about her teenage son's grades. These weren't criminals. They were ordinary people processing paperwork without understanding the bigger picture, all while I was secretly documenting the elaborate system Sterling had designed. It was brilliant in its simplicity, and that's what made it so dangerous. Small fees automatically generated on certain types of accounts, a $2.50 maintenance fee here, a $5 transaction processing charge there. Administrative charges applied and then reversed, but leaving a tiny percentage behind. Systematic rounding in the bank's favor that most customers never noticed. Each method yielding modest sums that, when multiplied across thousands of accounts, produced hundreds of thousands annually. I ran the calculations during lunch breaks, using skills I'd developed managing million-dollar construction budgets. The average victim lost about $6 to $8 per month, not enough to cause immediate alarm, but over a year, that's $72 to $96 per person. Multiply that by 1,200 accounts and you're looking at $86,400 to $115,200 annually just from the basic fee structure. Then add the rounding schemes, the reverse charges that left residual amounts, the administrative errors that always favored the bank. The money flowed through a maze of internal transfers before disappearing into investment accounts registered to shell companies. I traced the digital trail using techniques I'd learned in financial crimes training, combined with old-school project management detective work my mentors had taught me decades ago. Follow the money like you'd follow a blueprint. Every line connects to something else. The construction experience was invaluable. I'd spent 25 years tracking costs, identifying where money was being diverted, catching contractors who were inflating bills or using substandard materials. Financial fraud wasn't that different, just moving numbers around instead of materials. Sterling drove an $80,000 BMW. His assistant had a brand new Mercedes. The regional manager just bought a vacation home in Colorado. Meanwhile, customers like Mrs. Adams came in monthly, confused about her balance. "I know I had $347 in there last week," she'd say, clutching her checkbook register. Rachel would pull up her account with sympathetic efficiency. "Sometimes pending charges take time to show up, Mrs. Adams. See, here's your grocery store charge from Tuesday, and there's the utility payment." Mrs. Adams would leave, still confused but too embarrassed to argue. The system counted on shame and self-doubt to keep victims quiet. By month 3, I had confirmed the scheme existed and identified the basic structure. By month 6, I had mapped out the key players and understood the money flow. Sterling was the architect, but he had help. David Walsh at the Federal Banking Commission was providing protection, warning them about potential investigations and helping them modify their methods when scrutiny increased. Walsh was the real prize, a former Alpine board member who'd moved to the commission 5 years ago. From there, he could monitor enforcement activities, provide early warnings, and even influence which institutions got audited. The connection made sense once I dug deeper. Walsh had been Alpine's compliance officer before moving to the federal level. He knew their systems inside and out, understood exactly how to help them stay ahead of regulators. Classic revolving door corruption. By month 9, I had documented the complete operation: the automated fee system, the shell company network, the regulatory protection scheme. I'd even identified which employees knew what they were doing versus those just following orders. Rachel, Shane, Nicole. They were innocent. They processed the paperwork they were given, applied the fees they were told to apply, and answered customer questions with the explanations they'd been trained to provide. The compartmentalization was perfect. Nobody below Sterling's level saw the complete picture. But Sterling knew exactly what he was doing. So did his immediate supervisor, the regional compliance officer, and the VP of operations. 7 people total who understood they were stealing from customers. The operation was scheduled to conclude the following month. We had enough evidence to ensure convictions, enough documentation to recover the stolen funds, and enough insider knowledge to prevent similar schemes at other institutions. Then Sterling moved up the timeline by announcing my investigation. What I didn't know until later was that a routine security scan had flagged my after-hours access. Nothing conclusive, just patterns that raised questions. I'd been careful, but not careful enough. Military precision had served me well in documenting everything, but it had also created a digital signature their monitoring software eventually noticed. Sterling, always paranoid about exposure, decided to eliminate the risk by making an example of me. He'd done it before. 3 employees in the past 5 years had been publicly accused of misconduct, forced to sign away their rights, and escorted out. The perfect way to remove potential threats while sending a clear message to everyone else. Don't ask questions. Don't dig too deep. Don't think too hard about what you're processing. Except this time, he picked the wrong target. After the arrests, I sat in a debriefing room, surrounded by my actual teammates. The adrenaline crash left me exhausted, but there was also relief. 11 months of living as someone else, of pretending to laugh at jokes while documenting crimes, of building fake friendships while planning arrests. It takes a toll. "You did good work, Pierce," Agent Coleman said, sliding coffee across the table. 11 months of evidence gathered, 17 individuals identified in the scheme. Approximately $3.2 million siphoned from customer accounts over 3 years. "The customers," I said. "When do they get their money back?" "Asset recovery is already working on it. The tricky part will be identifying all 1,200 victims. Some probably never noticed the small amounts, like Mrs. Adams, who came in monthly to question her statement, only to be told she must be misremembering her balance. or young teachers who were made to feel financially illiterate when they questioned unusual charges on their first checking accounts. Elderly couples who couldn't afford medication because their accounts were mysteriously short every month. Single mothers who thought they were terrible at managing money when their grocery budgets kept disappearing. The system counted on shame and self-doubt to keep victims quiet. "We'll need your testimony," Coleman continued. "This won't be quick or easy. Financial crimes rarely are." I nodded, already preparing for the long road ahead. The arrests were just the beginning of a case that would take months to fully prosecute. The trial preparations consumed the next 3 months, endless meetings with prosecutors, reviewing evidence, preparing testimony. The case had expanded beyond Alpine Financial to include 2 partner institutions implicated in the money trail. 23 defendants now, not 17. I was back to being Zachary Pierce, federal agent, but I couldn't shake the ghost of Mason Wells. Sometimes I'd catch myself responding to that name or unconsciously adjusting my appearance the way I had for nearly a year. 6 weeks after the arrests, Coleman knocked on my office door. "Heads up, Sterling hired Marcus Cross." My stomach tightened. Cross was a defense attorney known for 2 things: exorbitant fees and ruthlessly discrediting witnesses. He'd destroyed FBI testimony before, turned solid agents into unreliable witnesses through aggressive cross-examination. "They're claiming entrapment," Coleman continued. "Filed motions to suppress almost everything we gathered, arguing the undercover operation wasn't properly authorized. That's ridiculous. We followed every protocol. Of course we did. But they only need to create doubt." He hesitated. "And there's something else. They're digging into your past, your wife's situation, suggesting you had a personal vendetta." Patricia had died 4 years ago, but Cross didn't care about the timeline. He was building a narrative that I'd manipulated evidence because of personal bias, that my grief had clouded my professional judgment. Later that evening, as I left the federal building, a familiar car pulled alongside me. Shane Bennett rolled down the window. Agent Pierce, can we talk?" Against better judgment, I got in. "I didn't know," he said immediately. "About any of it, I swear. I believe you. Some of us have been questioned. They make it sound like we should have known, like we were all part of it." His hands fidgeted with his keys. "My wife thinks I could be charged. We have a second baby coming in December. This was the collateral damage of financial crimes. Not just the direct victims, but the innocent bystanders caught in the aftermath. People like Shane who processed numbers without understanding their significance." "If you cooperated honestly, you should be fine," I assured him. "There's no evidence you knew what the fees were really for. There's something else." His voice dropped. "Rachel got a call from Sterling last week, from jail. He was asking questions about you, what you accessed, who you talked to." My pulse quickened. What did she say? Nothing helpful, I think. But Zachary, he's not the only one making calls. The week before the arrests, there were executives visiting from Westward Partners. They spent hours in closed meetings with Sterling. One of them keeps calling the office asking about server backups and archive access. Westward Partners was the investment firm we suspected was laundering the proceeds, but we hadn't been able to prove direct connection. If they were getting nervous, trying to destroy evidence. I thanked Shane for the information and recommended he speak directly to the prosecution team. As he drove away, I called Coleman. "We need to check on Alpine's external partners. They're getting nervous." 2 days later, a key witness, Alpine's former IT director who had agreed to testify about how the fee system was programmed, was found unconscious in his home. Carbon monoxide poisoning from a faulty heater. He survived but suffered memory impairment affecting his recall of specific technical details. "Just a coincidence," the local police said. The prosecution disagreed and placed 3 other witnesses in protective arrangements. I received additional security protocols, including a temporary relocation to a different apartment. "They're desperate," Coleman reassured me. "This means our case is strong." But doubt had taken root. Our meticulous operation was under siege from multiple directions: legal challenges, witness intimidation, media leaks questioning the investigation's integrity. The worst blow came during the preliminary hearing. Cross had somehow obtained internal emails between my supervisor and me from before the operation. "Agent Pierce," Cross cross-examined me on the stand. "Would you say your judgment regarding Alpine Financial was impartial and unbiased?" "Yes." He produced the emails with theatrical precision. Then perhaps you can explain why you wrote, and I quote, "I've seen this pattern before. It destroyed my family. I won't let it happen to others." The judge allowed the line of questioning despite prosecution objections. I could feel the jury's attention shift, see doubt creeping into their expressions. "You created an elaborate fiction to infiltrate Alpine," Cross continued. "Lived as Mason Wells for nearly a year. Isn't it possible that your desire for justice, or perhaps revenge, for your wife's death colored your interpretation of routine financial operations?" Number. The evidence speaks for itself. Evidence you selectively gathered while operating under false pretenses, driven by personal grief rather than professional objectivity. By the time I left the stand, the damage was done. Cross had painted me as a vigilante with a personal vendetta, not a professional agent following evidence. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated Rachel Foster. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Parking level 3, blue sedan, 10 minutes. Come alone." Every training protocol warned against such meetings, but something told me this was important. I tucked my service weapon into my jacket and took the elevator down. The parking garage was dimly lit and eerily quiet. Rachel stepped out of her car looking nothing like the friendly co-worker I'd known. Her face was drawn, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "I shouldn't be here," she said without greeting. "But I can't sleep. I keep seeing Mrs. Adams' face. Mrs. Adams, the old woman who came in crying because her account was short for the third time. Sterling had Rachel tell her she must be confused. She died 2 months later." Rachel's voice cracked. "Her son came in to close her account and mentioned she'd been skipping heart medication because she thought she couldn't afford it." I remained silent, letting her continue. "After they tried to fire you, I started looking more closely at the accounts I handled, the patterns you must have seen." She handed me a USB drive. This was supposed to be destroyed during the system upgrade last week. It's the original programming directive for the fee structure, with Sterling's annotations explaining exactly how to maximize revenue from low-attention customers. She passed over a legal notepad, and this is dates and times of calls Sterling made from detention, including 3 to someone named Jordan Banks at Westward Partners. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I processed the paperwork when Mrs. Adams closed her checking account to pay for her husband's funeral 4 years ago. I helped her set up automatic payments for her bills, including her prescriptions. I was part of the system that killed her." Her voice hardened. "And because yesterday someone left a picture of my house on my car windshield. No message, just the picture." After Rachel left, I immediately took the materials to Coleman. The USB drive contained exactly what we needed. Direct evidence linking Sterling to the deliberate creation of the fraudulent fee system, with detailed notes calculating expected revenue from different customer demographics. "This changes everything," Coleman said. "But we need to get Rachel protection immediately." By the time we sent agents to her home, she was gone. Packed bag, cell phone left behind. Her husband said she'd received a phone call and left immediately, telling him to take their daughter to his mother's house upstate. The next morning, Cross withdrew several key motions in the case. By afternoon, 3 defendants had approached the prosecution about cooperation deals. "They're turning on each other," Coleman said. Classic response when the evidence becomes overwhelming. The breakthrough came when Rachel's evidence led us to Jordan Banks, CEO of Westward Partners. Faced with documented communications and his firm's role in laundering stolen funds, Banks agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for reduced charges. His testimony revealed the true scope. It wasn't just Alpine Financial. They were running similar schemes at 4 other institutions, across 3 states, all coordinated through Westward Partners and protected by David Walsh at the Federal Banking Commission. Walsh tried to flee the country when Banks's cooperation became public, but was arrested at a private airfield. When confronted with evidence from multiple cooperating witnesses, he broke and started naming other officials involved in exchange for consideration. The system Walsh had built to protect himself became his undoing. Once the first domino fell, everyone rushed to save themselves, creating a cascade of cooperation that exposed the entire network. When the verdicts came in, Sterling and 14 co-defendants were found guilty on all counts. They received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. David Walsh, the mastermind behind the regulatory protection, got 20 years for corruption and obstruction of justice. But the true victory came after the sentencing when the judge announced the creation of a comprehensive restitution fund. More than 1,200 people would finally recover what had been stolen from them, with interest. As the courtroom emptied, I approached the prosecution table where Lisa Stone was packing her files. "Rachel," I asked, "safe?" She testified via video link from a secure location. Her cooperation was crucial to exposing the multi-state network. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions about the case, about my undercover work, about the sentences. I ignored them all and drove to Mount Olive Cemetery. Patricia's grave was exactly as I'd left it 3 months ago, but something felt different now. I placed fresh flowers on her headstone and sat on the marble bench we'd picked out together. "Mission accomplished," I said quietly. "They can't hurt anyone else now." The system they'd created wasn't just dismantled, it was exposed to its foundations, preventing similar schemes from taking root elsewhere. The Federal Banking Commission underwent complete restructuring with new oversight protocols. Alpine Financial was dissolved, its legitimate assets transferred to institutions with verified ethical practices. My greatest satisfaction came months later when I personally delivered restitution checks to elderly victims like Mrs. Adams' son, watching disbelief turn to tears of relief. The average recovery was $890 per victim, money that represented groceries, medications, utility bills these people had struggled to afford. Sterling, Walsh, and their associates lost everything: their wealth, freedom, and reputations. But more importantly, they lost their power to harm others. Not through dramatic confrontation, but through quiet, methodical justice. The kind Patricia would have been proud of. The kind that honors the badge and the oath I took when I traded my hard hat for a gun at 51. Sometimes the best victories are the ones nobody sees coming. Justice doesn't always require grand gestures. Sometimes the most powerful victories come through patience, precision, and refusing to let criminals hide behind complexity. The real measure of a man isn't avoiding failure, but what he builds from the ashes of his worst moments. I'd failed to protect Patricia from the scammers who killed her, but I'd made sure 1,200 other families wouldn't face that same loss. As I stood to leave the cemetery, I touched Patricia's headstone one last time. The construction calluses on my hands had softened during my time at the Bureau, but the strength was still there. Different work, same purpose. Building something that would last, protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. The FBI had offered me a permanent position heading their new financial crimes construction division, focusing on contractor fraud and development scams. At 56, I was starting another new career, using everything I'd learned in both my old life and new one. Patricia would have laughed at that, her husband the eternal student, always ready to learn something new. But she would have been proud too. The work wasn't finished, but her death hadn't been in vain. That's all a man can ask for: the chance to turn his worst day into someone else's salvation. Sometimes justice isn't about the size of the victory, but about making sure the right people sleep peacefully at night. The strongest foundations aren't built from concrete and steel. They're built from ordinary people who refuse to let the powerful prey on the powerless.